Welcome to the fastest daf in town. Today, Masechtas Zevachim daf Pei Dalid. We are going to begin on Pei Dalid Amud Aleph by the new Mishnah. Says the Mishnah, says as follows: Elu, these are the following cases. Im Olu Yardu. That even though technically maybe there's some problem, as we saw before, but if it gets to the Mizbeach, we're not going to take it down. It can just continue to be burned on the Mizbeach. So, and we'll discuss why these particular things. One is halon, says Rashi, one who left overnight, bein dam, bein imurim. It doesn't matter if we're talking about blood or the sacrificial parts, so that if it goes up, then lo yardu. Furthermore, v'yaitse, someone who takes the carbon outside of its designated area, v'tameh, someone who is tameh, or we'll maybe discuss maybe the carbon is tameh, which we've seen this many times, in the event where a person does the shechita with the improper thought of it being done either outside of its designated time or place. V'shekibu psulin, let's say someone who is pasul does the kabbalas adam, zarko damo, or they do the zrikas adam. So in all these situations, even though it's not supposed to have been done that way, nonetheless, im olu yardu, it doesn't come off. Rabbi Yehuda Aimer shenishchat b'layla. Rabbi Yehuda adds a few other cases, and including these three in which he disagrees, which we're going to see. The Gemara is going to explain why, but these are three that Rabbi Yehuda holds that also imolu yardu. One is one who does the shechita at night, which you're not supposed to do, or the nishvach dama. Let's say you did the sprinkling of the blood, v'yotze dama chutz l'kilayim, and you took the dam outside of the zara, outside of the designated area. So you mean alta terid. Actually, in these cases, he says that if you if you do put it up, it does come down. So this apparently argues with the Reisha, but certainly this is what he says. Rav Shimon Omer lo terid. So the machlokes is actually Rav Yehuda and Rav Shimon. Apparently, Rav Shimon holds in all these three cases that we would not. Shahaya paisel b'kodesh. Rav Shimon Omer kosher paisel b'kodesh. Anything that was pasul, it was kosher before it entered into the azara, then hikdish mekabaloi. Lo ha'ipsulo b'kodesh, ein hektish mekabli. So basically, what we're saying is that the cutting point is it something in which was already problematic from before, or is it something that was kosher before it entered the azara? So Rav Shimon holds when it comes to doing the shechita b'layla. So, but the animal was fine before that. Also, one who spilled the blood, or someone who took the dam outside, but before the carbon was fine. So therefore, he holds that all these things are we would say lo terid, the im olu yardu. Okay, and the Gemara is going to elaborate more on that. Velu shlo hayipsulim b'kodesh. So these are examples that are not psulim b'kodesh, which means that it was already problematic before they were even brought in. There was something wrong with the carbon or the animal before. Haroiva v'hanirva. And therefore, all these cases, we're going to say im olu yardu. When it comes to roiva v'nirva, one who cohabited with an animal, passively or actively, v'muksa v'nevid, someone who designated or actually used an animal for avodah zara, v'estan v'hamocher, a person who gave for a zaina her services, an animal was exchanged, that animal, or v'mocher kelev, for the exchange of a dog, which is also a bezoyin, v'kilayim, and a forbidden mixture of an animal, v'treifa, an animal it's a treifa that's going to die, v'yotze daifin, which is an interesting one. Yotze daifin literally means an animal in which was not born naturally. Ubali mumen. In all these cases, the din is im olu yardu. Rabbi Kiva makshir babali mumen. However, he disagrees. When it comes to a balmum, he says, Im olu lo yardu. And Rav Chanina, Sagana Kohanim, remember, Doicha haya abba is bali mumin me'al gamim mizbeach. I know for a fact that my father, who served in the Beis HaMikdash, he actually would not allow this. And if there was an animal that was there, so Rashi says, he would actually take it down. Kishem she'im olu lo yardu. Just like, as we said, that if it goes up, those things above, we don't take them down. Kach im yardu lo yalu. The other way around. And once it comes off, for whatever reason, then we're not going to put it back on. So we're not going to put it back on the mizbeach. Like we said, let's say you have a part of a carbon that flew off the mizbeach. Somehow, a piece of it was burning and it fell off the mizbeach, so you can put it back. But not when it comes to these things. The cool one, and regarding all of them, she'olu chayim lo shemizbeach yardu. If you have an animal that comes up alive onto the mizbeach, then we're going to put it down. So it means, for example, an animal, let's say, for example, which is a balmum. So if it gets to the mizbeach alive, we're going to take it down. Oila she'olsa chayil rosh mizbeach terid. And for that matter, an oila that was alive, that went to the top of the mizbeach, which means you shouldn't be shechting it there, so we're going to take it down. You're not supposed to do the shechita there. You can take it down. Shachta b'rosh mizbeach, if you tack a shecht on the top, yavshit v'yan sacheha b'min kaimai. Then you'll actually have to do the skinning as well as the removal of the animal into various limbs. That needs to be done on the mizbeach itself, which again is not really optimal. Says the Gemara, Tanya, Rabbi Huda Eimer, Zeis Haya Ha'ela. So this is the key pasuk that we have been quoting often, which is from Parsha Sav. Sav is on this. Mon of Lamer, Zeis Tar Ha'ela, He Ha'ela. So Hari Elu Gimel Muatim. The fact is that this pasuk has three exclusionary words, as Rashi points out. Zos is a miyut, the he is a miyut, and also the hey in the word ha'oila. So now we have three things that we could exclude from this pasuk, which is mashma. These things, this oila or something maybe comparable to it, we keep it on the mizbeach, which means imol yardu. However, there's certain things that we don't, that instead, tered we're going to take down because of these three exclusions. Prat l'nishchat b'layil, as we saw in the Mishnah, if you shachted at night, v'shnishmach dama, if the blood spilled, and v'shiyayta dama chutz l'kalayim, if the dam was taken outside of its designated area, shim alta tered. So, this is referring to a situation where the psul took place before the zrika. Okay. Shimon Oimer Oila. So on this, as our Mishnah said, is a machlok. Because Shimon says, no, it can stay there. Now, ainly el. So we'll have to understand what does Rav Shimon do with this miyut. But ainly el oil ksheir. I only know this is referring to if you have a carbon oil which is kosher, and these are the exclusions. That's what the pasuk is talking about. It's talking about an oila that's kosher. So Menano Rabba Shinishchat B'Layla Shinishchat Dama V'Shiyaytza Dama Chutz L'Kalayim. How do we know these other cases that were shechted at night? It was so again. Ainly El Oil Ksher. I only know that that was supposed to go in the mizbeach is an Oil Ksher. How do I know to include Shinishchat B'Layla Shinishchat Dama V'Shiyaytza Dama Chutz L'Kalayim? And furthermore, also the other cases that our Mishnah said, Imol Yardu, Bahalon, as we said, if either the blood or the sacrificial parts were left overnight, Vayotzi, Vahatame, person is Tamish, Nishchel Chutzim, Zmana Chutzim Kaimo, Shekibel Psulin, or Zarkanis Damo. If a apostle person did the Kabbalah, they can do Zaris Kasher Shchita, but not Kabbalah, and also certainly not Zrika. And then the Brisa gives more include other situations of Yim Olo Yardu, which we saw before. We know when it comes to the carbon oil, the Zrika Sadam, the dam is supposed to be put below the Chuta Sikra, and the carbon chatas is above the chutasikra. What if you inverted it? So in that situation also, even though it wasn't done properly, imolu yardu. And for that matter, when it comes to the applications that were supposed to be done in the Mizbeach HaPnimi, instead it was done on the Mizbeach HaChitzayin, the Mizbeach HaNechayshis, or vice versa. Again, will teirate. And not only that, we also add Upesach L'chata Sheshachta Shulashmon Menayin. How do we know to include those? So when it comes to the Karban Pesach L'chatas, even though we saw in the very beginning of Masechta a long time ago, about 80 days ago, that when it comes to the Pesach and L'chatas, and maybe an Asham, different opinions over there, that it will not be Olu Shem Chayva, it's just apostles, but nonetheless, Imolu Yardu, Talmud Lomer, Torah Sa'oila, Riba, Torah Achas, L'chol Ha'oilin. So it's come to tell you, Sheim Olu Yardu, that when it comes to, it doesn't just mean stam, the carbon oila, but it means anything like an oila that is going to be put onto the mizbeach. The din is im olu lo yardu. So yochash animar b'haravei v'nir v'muksa v'hanevid v'estamachar v'kalayim v'trei for yotze daifen. You would think maybe I should include all those other categories. Talmud Omer zos. So no, the word zos comes to exclude those things. Then all those situations, as we already elaborated, is imolu teirin. Now the question is, Ma'ari Isel Rabbi says elu, Hoyt says elu. Why are we being so mean, excluding the Raiva, the Nirva, Muksav, Nevad, Estan, Machakel, Trey from Yossi Daifen? Why don't we say that's coming to include that, and that Im Olu Yardu, and all the other cases we saw would be Im Olu Yardu? Like, what's the difference? There's obviously a distinction between these two types of animals. So what is that distinction between the two, and why do we say one is a rabbi and one is a miut? So, Acher, so that's the question. Marisol Rabbi says Elu, Hoyt says Elu. So Acher Shariba HaKosav, as we continue to pay down the base, after the pasuk comes to include umiyat, and then it also comes to exclude. So Marbani es Elu. So why am I going to include the first list? Shahoyib Psulan B'Kodesh, which means that it was only became puzzle at the time in which it only afterwards. All right. The reason what happened is these things didn't become puzzle b'kodesh only once it enters in. The Roiv of Nirva already ushered to begin with, right? Once that Avera was done with it, or Avodah Zarah, and you worship this animal, at that point, that's it. It now is already an issue. It's not that the issue only came about sometime while it was already in the Azara. This happened before, and therefore it's obviously more problematic, and therefore it's more of a reason to exclude it. Okay, so that is that. All right, let's just keep on moving. Let's just finish the daf. Rabbi Huda, actually maybe not. Let's maybe see a question. Let's see if we have question TA5 here. Let's see what TA5 says. TA5. Kashem she'im olu yardu kach im yardu lo yalu. Armer ulu lo shanu el shlo mishlo behen haor amol mashlo behen haor yalu ama armer oil de. Oh, okay. We didn't do this yet. So I'm not sure why I marked that down. It was mentioned, but there's more there. That would be question TA5. Okay, but we're not there yet. So let me read the question again. Was I looking at TA5? It says here. Should be doing TA4. Okay, let me TA4. Amr Shlachish. Nesachim haboyim im hazevach hadibrav Shimon im olu yardu ma'kamash. Okay, we did that already. Okay, all right. So let's just hold off then. All right. For Rabbi Huda, Ma'asila Mahacha, Rabbi Huda learns this out from here. So this whole notion of all these other psulin from a different source. Menema amru lon badam kosher. Why do we say that if a person would have left over dam, that it's kosher, namely that it im olu yardu? right? That's what it really means. It doesn't mean that you did everything fine. It just, as Rashi says, it just means shim olu yard or tered shahari lon kosher be'imurin, because when it comes to leaving the limbs over, we know that it's fine there. That if we know when it comes to the imurim, im olu yardu, so we're going to establish that also by the dam. Lon be'imurin kosher, how do we know that that's true? Shahari lon kosher bebasar, because we know that if you would have left over the meat, then it's also kosher. Rashi is going basar shlomim hanechol l'shnei yamim, because when it comes to the meat, you have day, night, day. So if lon basar, of course it's not a problem because you'll have to eat it the next day. So therefore, just like the basar is not an issue of overnight, so too we'll compare it to the imurim and the dam. So because we have this leniency, basically, therefore we're going to say im olu yardu, and we do this for the other cases too. Yaitse, why are we lenient by yaitse? Shaha yaitse kasher babama. We know that there's no din of chutzlim kaimai when it comes to a bama, because it's done anywhere. There's no mechitzos, etc. So there's no issue of yaitse. Tame hoyav hutter le'avodas sibor. We know that tuma is hutter b'tzibura, so therefore we're lenient by tuma. Chutzl zmano hoyav umaratzel pigulai, which of course we know, as we've seen multiple times in this Masechta, the only time there could be an issue of pigul is if there's absolutely nothing else wrong with the carbon. However, if there was any other issue with the carbon, there's no din pigul, which again is a kula. If there's something else wrong with the carbon, then there's no din pigul. Chutzlim kaimo hoyel v'iskish chutzlim luzmanoi. So we as we've seen numerous times, chutzlim zman and chutzlim kaimo are linked together. Obviously, only chutzlim zmanoi achil, eating that would be chayv kares, not chutzlim kaimo. Okay, fine. Shekibul, so v'iskish chutzlim zmano shekibul psulim v'zarkos damoi. How about when it comes to a puzzle that does the Kabbalah or the Zrika? B'hanach psulim the chazle avoda sibor. It's referring to the avoda in which is it's fit for avoda sibor. What does that mean? Kegoyin tame, right? It's referring to just like someone who is tame. Okay, so the chi done and davar shlo behechshero medavar shebehechshero. How can you learn something which is shlo behechshero? For example, lon beimurin to lon bebasar. How can you learn one from the other? This is a question we saw before. How do we know that lon beimurin? Because we went from lon bebasar. The hayotzi, and also the hayotzi the mikdash, the hayotzi the bama, shin shemachitza. How can you compare one to the next? Because one has no mechitza, doesn't exist by a bama. So of course there's no issue of hayotzi there. So how could you compare it to this? So Tana azois Tana. So this Tana is azois tairasa oyla riba samachle. The fact is, he uses the psukim as the catalyst of learning this drasha. But nonetheless, we do also see, again, there's a pasuk, but nonetheless, these are things in which have a unique leniency to some extent, in order that we'll say im olu lo yardu. Okay. And now let's look at question 11. Mahu haritzui dashkan b'psulin the lahalan lo yardu or bihuda lon beimurin. So he said, this is a good question, but lon beimurin because it's kosher b'basar, right? By a shlama. How about yaitse because it's kosher b'bama. Tame because hoyel v'hutter b'avodas sibor. And how about chutzlas manai? It's hoyel umaratzel pigula. So very clean, good question. Okay, Rabbi Yochanan. Hasheichet behema b'layla b'fnim. A person who does the shechita of an animal, so far it's okay, and it's b'fnim, everything seems fine, but it was done b'layla. Now that's a problem. Obviously, it was not supposed to be done at night. B'mal b'chutz, pata b'chutz, v'oyla b'chutz, chayiv. So let's go straight into Rashi. So you're chayiv mishum malo b'chutz. Ve'afilu Rabbi Yehuda d'Omer im also b'fnim tered. Even according to him, he would say that if it was brought inside, it would be brought down. So again, according to this, if you would shecht bifnim b'layla, that becomes problematic, and therefore you're chayiv pehei and aleph lote pchusa m'sheichet b'chutz umal b'chutz. Fine, it shouldn't be any worse or any different than someone who shechs on the outside and brings it in, that you be chayiv. So if you shecht at night inside and then you brought it outside, so then you're going to be chayiv as well. Okay. Says Rashi, because the kaimon bahasheichet, we learned the chayiv el shchitasa ve'el yasa, that if you did the shchita b'chutz, that's one problem, and also of bringing it in. So you've done two violations. So Maser Rav Chia Baravin, hasheichet oif bifnim. Let's say you did shchita, and you're supposed to, when it comes to an oath, you're supposed to do malika. But instead of malika, you did shchita, and you did a bifnim, which you weren't supposed to do, because you weren't supposed to do the shchita, you're supposed to do malika. That's one problem. Mal b'chutz, and you burned it outside, potter. So interestingly enough, it says you're potter on the burning of it. It says Rashi, she'ein miskabel bifnim el molik, because since what you did initially wrong was the malik, you didn't do malika, so therefore everything else just doesn't mean anything. However, shachat b'chutz, let's say you did the shchita outside, which is the proper thing to do, because we only do malika b'fnim, u'mal b'chutz chayiv. So in that situation, since you did the shchita outside, therefore because of that, you're going to be chayiv on both of them. First of all, that you shechted an oif kachim outside, and also for bringing it inside. So those are the two problems. However, if you would have just done the shchita bifnim, then you would be potter from being mal b'chutz. Now, Neima, why don't we say lote b'chusa m'sheichet mal b'chutz? Tiyovta. You can ask that same question. If this is the din when it comes to an oif, that we make a distinction between one who does the shchit bifnim, that you only chayiv one. If you shecht outside and bring it out, and it's done outside, you chayiv two. So why, if that's the case, would we assume that one who shechs a behem at night bifnim, which is wrong, and then you bring it outside, that you're going to be chayiv, because it shouldn't be any worse than someone who shechs outside. Someone who shechs inside at night should be no different than one who shechs outside, that you're chayiv. But it's not true, because we don't see that just because one case you're chayiv, the other case you should also be chayiv. We don't see that when it comes to the din of a bird. So tiyovta ibois eim shchitas oif bifnim mikdal katle. Now, when it comes to shchitas oif inside, the reason why you're potter is you just killed it, right? So therefore, since you didn't do malika, it's considered like you didn't. There's nothing going on over there. It says Rashi, lo shaycha shchita bifnim klal. There's no possibility of ever talking about doing shchita when it comes to a bird inside the Beis Hamikdash, in the Azara. Lo b'chul and lo b'kachim. Of a shchitas layla shchitahi b'chul. Now, even though you're not supposed to have done the shchita at night, it still is shchita. If we were dealing with chulin, hilchach b'kachim shchita psula hi karuya. Therefore, it's called a shchita psula. It's at least called a shchita. Not that, again, you're supposed to do it, but at least it's a shchita. The other one, when it comes to not doing malika, it's nothing. It's not considered a shchita. It's considered nothing. And that's the reason why you're potter of it, by the case of the bird. But over here, shchita b'layla still is a shchita, and therefore you should taka be chayiv. Okay, we're going to stop there. Now let's look at question 12. Im chayiv b'ofanim dahalon mishum hahala, like bringing it in and burning the carbon. Shoichet oif b'chutz umal b'chutz. Let's get the bird cases before. Sheichet oif b'chutz umal b'chutz. So if you did the shechita of the bird outside and it remained outside, so in that case, let's just get all the cases, then you would be chayiv. But if you're sheichet oif bifnim, there is no shechita, it's nothing, right? Umal b'chutz, you're going to be potter, again for the ha'alah, okay, for the second thing. However, sheichet behema b'chutz umal b'chutz, sheichet behema b'lai b'fnim umal b'chutz, in both those cases, you would think you'd be chayiv, but actually, we're going to say that sheichet behema b'lai b'fnim umal b'chutz, which is our case that we brought up already with Rabbi Yochanan, we're going to have to say it's a machlokas, because we did mention that based on this, there was an opinion of it being a tiyofta, and therefore it's shaykh that we actually don't hold like that. Okay, and therefore that's the correct answer. So again, when it comes to the bird, if you did the shechita b'chutz, so they're going to be chayiv. You did the shechita b'fnim, you're going to be potter. But it comes to the behema, if you do the shechita of the behema outside, umal b'chutz, you're going to be chayiv, just like a bird. However, if you sheich behema b'layla, it's not the same thing as shechting the bird b'fnim, that you'd be potter, because maybe taki you would be chayiv, right? But it's a machlokas. Okay, so we're going to stop with that. And again, now let's see if TA5 doesn't really, no, we didn't really answer that. We didn't really get to that yet. So let's hold off on that. So let's see if I marked it down. Okay, it's over here. It's definitely in the next daf. Let's look at TB 7. Kishahadam o imurim nifsal b'yoytzi im imurim ha'im amrinan im olo lo yardu. Kishahadam or imurim nifsalu b'yoytze him amrinan im olo yardu. Let's hold off and maybe we'll answer this tomorrow. Atkan.